So we welcome Luke Jolliffe to The Real Review. And good morning, Luke, and thanks for joining us, and congratulations on Stella Bella being in the top wineries of the year for 2022 with The Real Review. Great achievement.
Thanks, Huon, and yeah, good morning.
Yep, and you're in Margaret River, where you're the chief winemaker of Stella Bella, which also has the wonderful Suck Fizzle brand from the southern Margaret River. And you produce Chardonnay, Cabernet, Semillon, Sauvignon Blanc, and the usual suite of Margaret River specialties. How is it that Margaret River is so good at producing great Chardonnay and great Cabernet? When you think of the old world, when you think of where they originated, Bordeaux and Burgundy are quite different regions, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always been, I guess, one of those interesting things that I don't know whether you can always particularly explain. You know, when you look at the climate of Burgundy being a lot, nowhere near Mediterranean, nowhere near a coastline, and Margaret River obviously being predominantly on that coastline. But I think it's got to do with those cooling breezes from the Chardonnay point of view. We've got, the Indian Ocean and to the west. And then if you head down, further down towards Augusta, obviously the Southern Ocean, bringing those cooling breezes in and acting like the air conditioner on our beautiful ginger and Chardonnay grapes and cooling them down. So we managed to maintain that natural acidity and those more delicate kind of flavors. And I guess from a Cabernet point of view, it makes more sense. A lot of the great Cabernet regions of the world are on a west coast quite close to the ocean.
Yes, and maybe this is beside the point a bit, but if they started planting Chardonnay in Bordeaux, they might be surprised at the results.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's often said that great wine begins in the vineyard. How much of it do you think is due to the vineyard, and how much of it is due to what happens after the grapes are picked?
Yeah, I think both, I've always respected that saying, and I think there's every great wine does start in the vineyard, of course, but I think there's ways of manipulating a wine once it gets into the winery to develop a certain kind of wine style. And I think that's where a lot of Margaret River's at these days, which is, what is your wine style and what kind of wine do you want to create? So yeah, naturally understanding your vineyard, making sure what sort of canopy management you want to do, make sure you know what sort of pruning you want to do, and what sort of level of fruit exposure. All of those viticultural and cultural practices have a big impact on the resultant wine. But especially with both Chardonnay and Cabernet, once you take the next step and bring the fruit into the winery, there's so many different little nuances that can have a big impact on the final wine. And I'm a big believer in all those little attention to detail things that you can do in the winery have a big part to play.
Yeah, and I guess the old idea of a winemaker being in the winery and the vineyard manager being in the vineyard are starting to be a bit old hat, because I think more and more of you, and yourself especially, you're a vigneron. You spend a lot of time in the vineyard too, don't you? Tasting and observing the fruit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was actually a viticulturist before I was a winemaker. So 10 years in the vineyard, actually kind of understanding what viticultural practices actually have a big impact on the resultant wine. And then Stella Bella in 2007 started, I guess, my being an assistant winemaker, and then trying to develop that area of expertise and that area of knowledge, and making sure I'm in the vineyard every week, basically walking the vineyard, taking notes, looking at how things are going, because another thing that's really important from my perspective is not really, not being too prescriptive in what we do. Yeah, we understand the small elements of what we want to do, but every season is different. And if we treat it like a recipe, you'll get exactly that, a recipe made wine, which is not what we want to do. We want to make sure that we've got an individual wine that represents the vintage.
Fair enough too. It seems to me that a lot of Australia, especially in southern Victoria, are chasing a very delicate pared back style of Chardonnay at the moment. Very subtle, no malolactic, gentle oak, etc. Whereas the style of Chardonnay out of Burgundy has always been a generous style of Chardonnay, and that's more akin to what you produce in Margaret River, I think. To what extent is that style local and regional, and to what extent is it winemaker influenced?
The Margaret River style you're talking about as a whole, I think it's very much winemaker influenced, and I guess there is definitely an element of fashion in it and what we like to drink, I guess. But that's not just limited to fashion, I guess. It's one of the things what suits Margaret River fruit, I think, is the key point there. And there's many different styles through Margaret River as well, being from full malo to no malo like we do. And I think, but what underpins all of that is the climate and the sites that you have that are distinguished sites, and those wines tend to rise to the top, in my opinion. So you've got the individual winemaker having a big impact on the wine, but those cultural and site specific flavors of those pink grapefruit and peach and I guess what I think is the fashion part of that at the moment, and or maybe not fashion, but what is so pinpoint about it is people are really paying attention to when they pick the fruit. It's very much the biggest element with regards to Chardonnay, in my opinion. You can't miss it by a day or two, otherwise you've totally changed the flavor profile of your resultant wine. Yeah,
it seems to me that a lot of the top Chardonnays in the region now, including your own, are more focused on southern Margaret River than perhaps in the early days. And I think your Luminosa is from just south of Margaret River Township, and your Suck Fizzle is from as far south as you can possibly go in Margaret River without being in the ocean. So those are cooler sites, obviously. Whereas some of the great Cabernets are coming from further north, Williabrip, and even further north up to Yallingup.
Yeah, but I think there's little pockets all through Margaret River. Like if you where there may be a little bit more wind or a little bit more heat traps, depending on where the site is. And I think that's always been one of the exciting things about it. There's so many opportunities to make great wine through Margaret River, being Chardonnay or Cabernet, and some of those more northern Chardonnay sites. If you find a little cool pocket in there, you've got a lot of opportunity too. Yeah. Excellent. Well, it's been great to chat to you, Luke, and thanks for coming online on a Sunday with us, and go and have a day of rest. And I hope to see you at some of our events, or at least one of our events, hopefully over east sometime in the next little while. To seeing you in Melbourne, that would be great. That would be great, yeah. So Luke Jolliffe, Chief Winemaker, Stella Bella Wines, thanks for joining us, and congratulations again on being amongst the top wineries of the year. Cheers, Luke. Thanks a lot, Huon.